Welcome back to our last edition this semester of Watching Washington, a public affairs broadcast brought to you by the Brian Lamb School of Communication. It's Friday, November 22nd, and my name is Regina Ortiz.
And I'm Kyle Herschel. Let's take a look at what happened this week. It has now been over 1,000 days since the beginning of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and tensions are still rising. For the first time in this war, Ukraine has fired long-range missile strikes against Russia. The missiles are United States-made Army tactical missile systems. Tuesday morning, the Kremlin confirmed 6 ballistic missiles were launched at Russian facilities. Following this, Russian President Vladimir Putin updated Russia's nuclear doctrine to include aggression from any non-nuclear state if they are aided by a nuclear country. And just in from yesterday, reports are coming saying that Russia has been launching ICBMs, however, Russia denies this.
The murder trial against Jose Ibarra in the death of Laken Riley is over, and the judge found Ibarra guilty. It's a case which has garnered national attention since Riley's death earlier this year. Ibarra encountered Riley while she was running on the University of Georgia campus on February 22nd and killed her during a struggle. Riley was a 22-year-old nursing student. While facing her killer in court, family and friends of Laken Riley honored her life and detailed the immense loss caused by Jose Ibarra.
Chances of meeting our grandchildren, and he took my best friend.
This case has become a flashpoint in the national debate over immigration. Ibarra was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after being found guilty on all 10 counts against him.
Donald Trump, the president-elect, announced that he plans to nominate Linda McMahon as the next Secretary of Education. McMahon previously served for 2 years as the head of the Small Business Administration during Trump's first term as president. However, she is most famous for her role in professional wrestling. She is the co-founder and former CEO of the World Wrestling Entertainment. According to sources, McMahon was chosen for Education Secretary after it became clear she would not be picked for Commerce Secretary. President Trump's nominee for Attorney General Matt Gaetz announced yesterday that he is withdrawing his name from consideration for the role of Attorney General. Gaetz, a now former congressman from Florida, has been under heavy scrutiny ever since Donald Trump announced his nomination. Gaetz has been under investigation by both the House Ethics Committee and the Department of Justice for many crimes, but most notably statutory rape and paying a 17-year-old girl to travel across state lines, which is a violation of federal law. While the investigation by the DOJ had been dropped, the House Ethics Committee just voted earlier this week on whether or not to release the findings of their investigation, and subsequently tied in a 5-5 vote along party lines. Now Gaetz is stepping back and saying, quote, "My confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition." President Trump will now have to find a new nominee for Attorney General.
The North Carolina State Senate passed a bill Wednesday that would set aside $227 million for Hurricane Helene victims. However, the bill would also take power away from the governor. Specifically, the bill would strip the incoming Democrat governor's power to appoint and oversee the Board of Elections. That power would be given instead to the incoming Republican state auditor. The bill would also shorten the time for provisional ballots to be processed from 9 days to 2.5. A time frame election officials say would likely result in votes not being counted. Democrat State Senator Dan Blue said the bill amounts to a massive power grab.
You're punishing North Carolinians for voting you out of power, and you're using Hurricane Helene as a distraction to cover those tracks.
The bill puts Democrat Governor Roy Cooper in a difficult position. He's been calling for more disaster relief, but he's very unlikely to sign a bill that would limit the power of future governors.
Pope Francis has once again spoken out about the ongoing violence in Gaza, urging for peace and a halt to the suffering of innocent civilians caught in the conflict. He called for an immediate ceasefire, emphasizing the need for dialogue and understanding, and reminded world leaders of their responsibility to protect human life at all costs. The Pope's words reflect the deep concern many feel over the escalating situation, as he continues to advocate for compassion, solidarity, and a peaceful resolution to the crisis.
The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Netherlands-based court said it found reasonable grounds to believe Netanyahu allegedly used starvation as a method of warfare. The court also says Netanyahu bears responsibility for crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. The ICC rejected Israel's challenge of its jurisdiction over the matter. Netanyahu's office calls the arrest warrant absurd and anti-Semitic. Warrants were also issued for former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and a Hamas official known as Mohammed Deif. But Israel claims it killed Deif in an airstrike earlier this year.
Netanyahu is making a lucrative offer to anyone in Gaza who's willing to return a hostage. During a visit to central Gaza on Tuesday, Israel's prime minister promised potential rescuers millions of dollars, as well as safe passage out of the territory for that person and their family. He has also stated that anyone that has harmed a hostage will pay the price. The father of one of those hostages explained what he thought of the deal.
It is unfortunate that after 411 days, the Prime Minister does not have a strategy. That is a tactic, and it is not a way to get all 101 hostages. It might bring a few. And the second part of his sentence that says we will harm anyone that does anything to the hostages is kind of like a setup where the underlying assumption is that bad things are happening to the hostages, which by coincidence is correct and should accelerate his ability to negotiate and bring these hostages home.
About 100 hostages from the October 7th attacks remain in Gaza, and it's believed dozens of them are dead.
Up next, Representative Nancy Mace is looking to ban transgender women from female bathrooms in the Capitol. How are politicians responding to the bill?
Plus, voters in California broke a 30-year precedent by not voting for a raise in the minimum wage. We have more on what may have influenced voters' decisions after the break. Stay with us, more Watching Washington next.
The Center for C-SPAN, which is this organization, the CCSC, what we do is we facilitate like a bunch of organizations, different programs for Brian Lamb, which is the founder of C-SPAN. Anyone can be part of CCSC, whether it be through our various internships, our competitions, just to be involved, even like our student community meetings that we have every week. Anyone can go, you don't have to be communications or poli-sci. You just meet so many people, the connections you make is kind of crazy, the range that CCSC has. So yeah, it's just provided me so many opportunities to like kind of achieve the goals I have personally and forward to like whatever career paths I choose.
A House Republican has introduced a resolution to ban transgender women from using women's restrooms in U.S. Capitol buildings. According to CNN, South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace is pushing for the ban less than 2 months before America's first out transgender person enters Congress. Sarah McBride will be sworn in January as a new representative from Delaware. Mace says McBride is a biological man who does not belong in women's spaces. In response, McBride said this was an attempt to distract from the real problems Americans are facing. Democrats in Congress have responded negatively to Mace's push.
Disgusting. I don't understand why Republicans are so obsessed with people's private parts. She's going to do these exams herself. I mean, it is absurd.
I think it's a very bigoted approach to the issue. And look, it's a complicated issue. There are interests on all sides, but this is just a personal attack against somebody. And this is part of the reason why so many of us feel it is so important to stand up for trans rights.
Her proposal is that that our new colleague from Delaware, Congresswoman McBride, has to use the men's room. I'm opposed to that.
With Republicans set to take control of the Senate in January, Senate Democrats are racing to confirm President Biden's judicial nominees before the year's end. The Senate has reached a deal with Republicans to fast-track 7 district court nominees after the Thanksgiving recess. This agreement is part of efforts to fill federal court vacancies before the new Congress begins. The deal includes a temporary pause on 4 appellate court nominees, including Adil Manji, a potential first Muslim federal appellate judge. The agreement emphasizes the need to confirm Biden's judicial nominees before the end of his presidency. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer emphasized the Senate's responsibility to confirm these nominees. To date, over 220 judicial appointments have been confirmed under Biden, with Democrats working to secure more before the year concludes. These confirmations aim to leave a lasting impact on the federal judiciary and ensure that courts reflect the nation's diversity. However, Republicans have signaled their intention to block some nominees in the next Congress, making these final confirmations crucial.
For the first time in almost 30 years, voters rejected a ballot measure to raise a state's minimum wage. In California, the ballot measure that would have raised the state's minimum wage to $18 an hour, $2 higher than the state's current minimum wage, was voted against by 50.8% of voters. The current minimum wage in California includes the exception made for fast food restaurants with 60 or more locations in the state, which pay their employees $20 an hour, as approved by California's governor in 2023. In addition, only last month the mayor made the exception to also raise the minimum wage for all California healthcare workers to $25 an hour. With these wage increases, California citizens have seen these workplaces cut back on staff and, in the instance of healthcare, become less available to patients in need. For this reason, nearly 40,000 UC healthcare union workers across California took part in a 2-day strike that started on Wednesday, November 20th. With the increase in healthcare workers' wages, UC healthcare workers are now working overtime to assist the same number of patients as they did prior to the switch. The university cut back on the number of workers employed in the UC system to make up for the additional costs of the increased wages. UC healthcare employees' greatest concern throughout this strike has been the overwhelming amount of individuals unable to pay for their housing. And many employees have spoken out about the university illegally increasing their healthcare costs by hundreds of dollars each month, which workers also cannot afford. With the importance that California voters have placed on this issue, it will be interesting to soon see the turnout of the UC healthcare workers' strike.
House Leader Hakeem Jeffries won re-election as the Democratic leader on Tuesday. According to the AP Jeffries, the representative for New York's 8th Congressional District remains the highest-ranking Black member of Congress and is the first to hold the job of party leader. Jeffries took over from former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi when she stepped down from Democratic leadership 2 years ago. Along with Jeffries, the other members of top House Democratic leadership, Democratic Whip Catherine Clark and Democratic Caucus Chairman Pete Aguilar, also won their re-elections. Despite leading the minority party, Jeffries still has the potential to be influential in which bills get passed in the upcoming legislative term due to the Republican slim House majority. According to The Hill, Jeffries commented on this Tuesday, quote, "And so in the new Congress, for anything to happen, it's clear House Republicans cannot do it on their own."
The Pacific Northwest has been experiencing severe weather due to a bomb cyclone. This occurs when a cyclone rapidly intensifies, with its central pressure dropping by at least 24 millibars within 24 hours, leading to strong winds and heavy precipitation. In Washington state, 2 individuals have passed away due to falling trees. 500,000 residents have experienced power outages, while numerous injuries have been reported. Meanwhile, a strong atmospheric river event is also affecting Northern California and Southwest Oregon, with flood watches in effect for 2 million people. A second storm will soon follow a similar path while the first diminishes, the National Weather Service said Wednesday.
Instead of an in-studio guest this week, for our last edition of Watching Washington this semester, our class will have a roundtable discussing the state of politics in America and what we thought of the 2024 election.
The roundtable just ahead on Watching Washington.
The program allows students to finish their bachelor's degree and also get an online master's degree that overlap during their last year at Purdue.
Students can more quickly work towards a graduate degree while concurrently starting their professional careers.
The online program allows them to kind of go at their own pace, and so they're not having to abide by the academic calendar.
And our goal is that this would make you even more compelling for your next opportunity in the workforce.
Instead of a special guest this week, the Watching Washington Fall class will be doing a roundtable discussion of the state of politics in America and our opinions on the 2024 election. My name is Will Courtney, and behind me is just a few of our class. Over the course of the semester, we've put together 8 editions of this show and a 3-hour election night coverage. Though you may not have seen all of our faces, every single person in this room and outside of this room has contributed in no small part to making this program happen. So let's go ahead and go straight into the interview. Thank you guys for being here. Join with me. I have Jack Brown, I have Regina Ortiz, I have Kyle Herschel, and I have Brandon Aram. We're going to start a little bit about this show itself. As I mentioned, we did our 3-hour election night broadcast. I actually did it alongside Kyle as my co-anchor. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about the election night broadcast? What did we think about it? What did we kind of learn from that?
I think it went really well. I went into it definitely thinking it was gonna, like, things were just gonna go wrong and I was gonna, like, make a fool of myself or something. And it actually turned out being really great and went way better. We got a lot of ad-lib work, did a lot of things that we weren't entirely comfortable with yet, but I think now we feel great being able to do it on camera. So
yeah. Brandon
also,
was our producer too.
Yes, as producer that night, there's a lot of new information coming in, a lot of new stories, a lot of new details. So a lot of it was on the fly and off the cusp. So a lot of major adjustments in the moment that our talent did fantastic job.
Thank you.
So overall went fantastic in the end.
And then I believe both of you were also anchors for that night as well.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your experience.
I was the anchor for the first hour from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and unlike Kyle and Will's hour, it wasn't that chaotic. We actually didn't get any updates on results until probably like 3/4 of the way through our hour, and like well past when we first thought we were going to get results from Indiana and Kentucky. So that meant we didn't have to do a lot of ad-libbing, and we kind of just got to read the stories. And even though there were some technical difficulties that happened, it all went pretty smooth. And it also helped that we were able to have 2 separate panels, so we didn't have to be speaking the entire time, and we could listen to some really great panels.
Yeah.
I also anchored like an hour before you guys, and before it, I was very excited but also nervous, but I felt more prepared because I believe like this course has prepared all of us to like public speak, like speak in front of like a lot of people. And I thought it was great like that the whole class came together to like work all together in like each different positions to make it possible. And I think it was a really great night. It was really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of going off of that, a big part of what we were doing was kind of calling the races as they came out and talking about the results. And that went for both, you know, Congress, but also the presidency. Even in Indiana with the gubernatorial race, Indiana was one of the first states to actually close. So let's talk a little bit about the results themselves. Obviously, we'll be having like full legislative control in both the House and the Senate for the Republicans, an executive run by President Trump, now President-elect Trump. What are we kind of thinking about these results themselves? Are they surprising? Is this something that we saw coming? I know me and Kyle, we talked a lot about when these results were coming out that, oh, you know, these states are like, you know, going red, like this is kind of what we expect. And then about the time our broadcast closed, we had some big swing states turn a pretty steep red. So like, what do we kind of think about those results?
Yeah, I think that was the most surprising thing for me. It wasn't entirely who won, but it was the fact that the 7 swing states that we were focusing on, Trump ended up winning all of them. And I think that was very surprising. I don't know if we've seen that over the last few elections where someone has won every swing state, but that was the biggest shocker to me.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle said, and I also think it's crazy that it's not like in these swing states Trump was running up big numbers. These were all fairly close, and like if you look at where the electorate was nationally, you can see that Kamala went, because she put a lot of resources into those swing states, she did better in those swing states relative to her performance nationally, and it's just surprising that with how close all those swing states were, not one was able to swing to her. And even you see like senators like Alyssa Slotkin or Ruben Gallego, who are Democratic senators who won their Senate seats in those swing states despite the fact that Kamala lost, that you didn't get like you didn't get like a down ballot effect from Trump being more popular in those swing states in the Senate races.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like towards the end of the night, I feel like a lot of people are waiting to hear for Pennsylvania and see where that's going to end. And obviously the rest is history because Trump got it and secured his presidency.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And Regina?
Oh, I found it sort of surprising, honestly. I thought they were more head-to-head. And it was surprising for me to see that Trump right away won. Everyone saw that he won right on that day. I know he won the majority of the votes, but still I saw a lot of like TV hosts, such as like the SNL hosts, say a lot of like, not a lot, but some negative things about the outcome of this election. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, kind of going back, we were talking about, the results themselves and like if they were surprising, and exactly what you said is what surprised me the most. President Trump, who's now run for office 3 times in 2016, 2020, now 2024. He's been successful twice, but the first time he didn't win the he didn't win the popular vote.
Yeah.
And now, like, more than ever, it's very clear that, there are people who like are very passionate for Trump. He's won the popular vote. He's clearly, a desired commodity in America, and I think a lot of, the media as a whole needs to kind of look at, okay, this race was, by all intents and measures, seemed to be close. This was supposed to be a close race, and it wasn't. So what does that kind of mean for polling? What does that kind of mean for all these sorts of other things of how media kind of maybe not tries to predict, but tries to like see the patterns of like where the electorate is going. So I think that's a good point that you raised. Like, what was media? I'm hopeful that media doesn't have an agenda, but what were the patterns that we were seeing, and were they accurate? And I think it's hard to say they were accurate. Do you guys have any opinion on that, on how we were how the race was looking prior to election night?
It was definitely made out like it was going to be a very close race, and like it was going to be much closer than it was, but not so much on the patterns. But I think with media and with what we're seeing now, with like Kamala at a lot of her rallies had celebrities and had endorsements on X and all these social media platforms, that I think this is going to be the first of many elections we're going to see for the future, where it's going to be a lot of, almost the eye of the public is how they're going to push their candidates forward. Is like, I almost feel like with Kamala it was more the celebrity side of it, and with Trump I feel like a lot of the middle class, like average citizen, were pushing him forward and trying to prop him up.
Yeah. I want to follow up on that too. I have another question here about what do you believe helped Trump or hurt Kamala? Kyle, you obviously talked a little bit about like, steering towards the public. There's a lot of different takes on like what hurt Kamala or what helped Kamala. Same for Trump. So do you guys have any like thing that you point at and you're like, okay, I understand why people voted for this reason? Or
I do.
What's that?
I think with Trump, a big thing is that all of his base is incredibly supportive of him, and like there isn't as much. It doesn't feel like there's as much differing like views on Trump in the Republican Party, at least among like his base supporters. And it feels like with Democratic candidates, you're gonna get more pushback from people like within your own party, like more progressive members of the Democratic Party are going to be more vocal in their opposition to a stance made by a Democratic candidate compared to like with Trump. It doesn't feel like there's as much pushback on like individual issues, and it feels like Trump's like done a good job of being able to encompass his like all of what his base believes in, so that there isn't like any major differences like within the base that could potentially fracture it. And I think that might have happened with Harris's campaign a bit.
Regina?
I also believe that the people who voted for the Republican Party wasn't, a lot of them, I know a lot of people who voted for the party and not for the person. And I feel like that's something we have to look at. Before like the election night, I know a lot of people were like, oh, Kamala or Trump, but actually it's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and a lot of people were just emphasizing the person representing that. I know a lot of people were against Trump just because of maybe his personality, but it also has to do a lot about who he's representing.
Absolutely. Brandon?
Yeah, it's just been really interesting to see how this play out. With Trump, he's kind of claimed that he will bring down inflation. In the last year and a half, you've seen a lot of inflation with gas, food prices, and overall just everything what you purchase. So him kind of having that stance with bringing down inflation, and then if you look at the past, he has led the economy and a lot of just overall historical rates, and also with the bonds. So kind of just looking with that, he'll be able to kind of lead this economy in a way that people would kind of get behind.
Yeah, and let's kind of continue with that and Trump's administration and his policy agenda. Now that we're looking into our second Trump administration, what are we maybe expecting to see from a Trump presidency? I'm sure this is no surprise to anybody, but obviously Trump has really campaigned on a lot of policy issues such as mass deportation on day one. And additional, he's had vague, I believe it was like ideas or concepts of a plan as it relates to healthcare, which both were big things that he campaigned on in 2016 that never ultimately came to fruition in the way that he probably wanted it to. So what do we think we expect from a Trump presidency, especially, looking to these some might call controversial or dramatic cabinet picks that he's kind of been going through, as we talked about today, Matt Gaetz having dropped out of the Attorney General position. Any thoughts on what to expect from a Trump presidency?
I believe more conservative approaches will be taken. For example, things regarding abortion, subjects regarding gender, such as what we saw with like transgenders, banning transgenders from female bathrooms. I feel like stuff like that, we're going to start seeing a shift and movement from the liberal side to the conservative side.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what we're going to see from like a specific policy point, because anything could really happen, but what I do expect is that there'll be something newsworthy basically every day. That's one of the things I remember from the first Trump presidency. Even though this was when I was in like middle school and high school, I remember that basically any day you could turn on the news and there'd be like something to report. And I think you kind of see it now where like his cabinet picks, there's a lot to say about them. And there was even like beyond Matt Gaetz, people like Pete Hegseth has a lot of baggage, and there was just like a police report that was released that involves a sexual assault allegation. And then there's also been reports that Tulsi Gabbard has some connections with Russia, and so I just think, and even if it's not like super controversial or on that level, I just think that there will be plenty of stuff to discuss when it comes to like Trump's day-to-day activities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very good point, Jack.
Yeah, I think part of, with Trump, one thing that he's always been is he's very much a doer. Like when he's in interviews, he's not always like, this is the plan I have for this, or this is something we could do. He's like, this is what I'm going to do when I get there. And if he doesn't have a plan for something, he'll openly, he'll say, I don't know what we're going to do yet, but I'm going to find the people and we're going to figure something out. So even if it's not entirely what as a country we may feel like needs done, he's going to do something. So I think what we're going to see is him constantly trying to do things. But interestingly enough, too, I think the way that the opinion of him has kind of shifted over is I feel like he's starting to push almost more towards the extremes. And I feel like a lot of the House and Senate may not entirely back all the things he wants to do. Like one of the things being shutting down the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Like I honestly, in a 4-year term, I don't think he's going to get that done.
Yeah. Brandon?
Yeah, with recent nominations in government, like Elon, billionaire Elon, and Vivek, kind of just removing a lot of regulation, and then also just really bringing down corporate taxes as well. So you're going to see a lot of small caps really just take advantage from that. In the last week, we've seen around a 7% increase in small caps. So
Yeah.
probably the biggest in the economy seen in a while, and also just 1.3 trillion being added since his announcement of winning the presidency. So.
Yeah, and I think you know, kind of going back to what Kyle said actually about getting the agenda actually passed as well. I think you made a good point about you know, I'm blanking a little bit, but I'm thinking that, you know, Matt Gaetz dropping out is, I think, you know, a little sign of like how unified is the party going to actually be.
Yeah.
You know, like I mentioned, they have full control of like the entire government. They can almost do whatever they want. But at the same time, you know, Matt Gaetz saying, you know, there's a little bit too much contention. I don't want to bring things down. Why is that contention there? You know.
Well, and that's part of like with the cabinet members that he's elected, so, like a good amount of them have almost some kind of celebrity around their name. Like either they've been in the eye of the public, or they've been in the eye of a high political standing. So I feel like he's almost surrounding himself with a cabinet built more for comfortability, and maybe a cabinet that will agree with him a little more, but it's what's going to happen outside of that cabinet. What's going to happen in the House? What's going to happen in the Senate? Are they going to side with the bills that he's going to potentially send down to them?
Yeah, these are a lot of. Regina, do you have something? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. These are a lot of great points, and I'm really happy with how this conversation kind of went, talking about like, you know, these really pretty, you know, important and intense conversations. Kind of to close this roundtable, I want to ask everybody. Obviously, we've learned a lot in this class, and you know, being able to go in front of a camera and talk about politics, which is not only, you know, incredibly, you know, maybe difficult to talk about because I'm sure everybody behind this desk has political opinions that we're not airing right now, but being able to talk about it in a way that's going to inform people as well. What are each of us going to be taking from this course specifically?
I know one thing I'm going to be taking from this course is just the idea that like you can have political conversations with people that can be on a very like middle of the road bias, and it doesn't have to be on one side or the other. Like you can have very comfortable conversations about issues and about things that affect both sides, and that both sides may have differing opinions on, but it's not at the heart of the issue.
Kind of just to add to that, I feel like kind of having that critical reasoning skill, which has really been highlighted in this class, not kind of just letting your emotions judge the way you think, but kind of just looking at it from a factual standpoint, especially with the news and the media these days, kind of just playing on your emotions a little bit. So just kind of being that middleman and looking at it from an outside perspective is a really big deal.
I can definitely agree to that. I was also discussing with Kyle prior to this roundtable that I think we all learned a lot each week with like what's going on, because of course we had a whole crew to develop these shows, and so we had to gather information, and so all of us really learned a lot about like what's happening in the world every week, and I love that aspect about this class, and I also believe we all improved in our speaking abilities, especially gaining confidence with the camera. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Jack?
One thing I'll take away, and it's kind of silly, but just appreciating how much stuff actually goes on each day in the world. Like I know that every Wednesday when we fill like our topic sheets, there's been plenty of weeks where we have to where we end up adding topics or we can't even get to everything, and it just puts into perspective like how much like actually goes on in the world that you can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are running a little bit close to time, but very, very quickly, I think the thing that I learned the most about this class is being able, like Regina said, just to get comfortable behind a camera. My goal in life, hopefully, is to be a journalist. I'm a senior in college, so like that goal is quickly, that dream is kind of being expedited pretty fast, but you know, getting behind a camera and doing TV is something that I've never really gotten the opportunity to do. And to very quickly sabotage our show as well, we have a little message that we wanted to say. We're going to end a little bit off script. We mentioned at the top of this segment that everyone in this room has contributed to the show in some way. And there's many people behind the camera as well who've also contributed as well. But there's someone specific that we really want to mention for making this whole entire thing happen, and that's our instructor, Liz Evans. Liz has poured so much time and passion into our growth as students, our mind as news consumers, and our heart as people as well. None of this, absolutely none of this, would have been possible without her guidance and her leadership every single day. And it was truly an honor to be students in her class during this exciting time in American history. From the bottom of our heart, thank you so much for all you have done for us, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
But that is all the time we have today. Thank you so much to everyone for being with us today and for watching Washington this semester.